Chicago, a city so plagued with crime that it needs a military takeover? Well, according to President Donald Trump and his administration, that's exactly what is going on because they have proposed a federal response to the local crime problem in Chicago. But the question is, can they do that? And hi, welcome to another episode of At Least You Heard It Here. I'm your host, Alyse Adamson, and this is the podcast where we put the topic of the day on trial. And today's topic is the proposed military takeover of the city of Chicago. So right off the bat, let's just start out with, can Donald Trump take over the city of Chicago federally, right? And the answer is no. Folks, this is as like a bright line in the law as you can possibly imagine, okay? The federal government cannot simply send in the military to a sovereign state to act as local law enforcement. You can't do it. If you've been watching the news, you're probably hearing a lot about something called Posse Comitatus, the Posse Comitatus Act. That is a law that says that the military cannot be used for domestic law enforcement functions. And when the military is used domestically, it's used for very limited purposes. They are never going to be your local police force. And the reason that law exists is because the people don't want the military to be functioning as local law enforcement. That is not the United States of America. We are not a militarized country, and we are a country that is made up of 50 sovereign states. Those states are ruled by governors, and we have our own police forces in those states. Now, the federal government can send in troops under certain circumstances. We saw that in California, right? But let's just be clear about what happened in California. Donald Trump did not send in troops to act as police officers. That wasn't even what he said at the time. It wasn't because of LA's crime problem, right? What happened in Los Angeles is that ICE was performing increased raids across the city. Protesters did not like that. They were exercising their First Amendment rights, getting out there and protesting the ICE raids. Now, what the president claimed was that the protesters were starting to get violent and they were preventing ICE from doing their job. Governor Newsom did not want the National Guard. He said, whoa, we got this. Our police officers can come in and control these crowds. President Trump disagreed, and he invoked a law that allows the president to send in the National Guard to help assist and protect federal personnel and like federal buildings, like if there was a federal interest. And initially, Governor Newsom sued. He said, no, you can't do that without me inviting you in here. And went to court. And the initial judge agreed. They said, you know what? The president cannot send in the National Guard under these circumstances. And the judge said there has to either be a rebellion or what's happening in California actually needs to prevent the government from performing their federal functions, right? An appeals court disagreed. They said, no. The protesters or whatever the disturbance is doesn't need to be so severe that the government is like crippled and can't do what it's supposed to do. If they're impeding on their ability to do their federal functions, that's enough. So for instance, the ICE officers couldn't make their arrest. They couldn't get in their ICE facilities. I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm saying this is an example. That's enough for then the government, the president, to be able to send in the National Guard. Now, whether or not he can send it in without the governor's consent, still some argument there, but, probably is the answer. Okay. We also saw a deployment in D.C. D.C. is completely different. D.C. is not a state, people. It is a federal district. D.C. is allowed to govern itself by statute. That means Congress passed a law called the Home Rule Act that gave D.C., I live in D.C., gave us the chance of self-governance. But the reality is Donald Trump did have the authority to invoke this emergency power and federalize the DC police force. It's right there in Section 40 in the Home Rule Act, okay? So all of those uses were legal. Now, the question in California is now, did the military overstep what they were allowed to do? Because the military is only allowed, as we said, to reinforce that federal interest. They cannot act as a local police force. So now a judge has found that in certain instances, the National Guard, maybe some of the Marines, were actually performing law enforcement functions, which is unlawful. A judge just found that the Trump administration violated the Posse Comitatus Act because those officers were going too far. They weren't just protecting federal interests, they were actually engaging in local law enforcement. That's what a judge found. Now, of course, the Trump administration has appealed that. We will see it's going back up to the appeals court, and we'll see what the appeals court says. But the reality is, in that case, they were talking about really like close, narrow issues like, ooh, were the police acting as crowd control when were the military acting as crowd control when they should have just been protecting a monument, things like that. Chicago, it's kind of like unambiguous. Like, it's very clear what Donald Trump is saying. He is saying the crime rate in Chicago is too high. We need to send in the feds to get it under control. Local crime, federal response. Unconstitutional. Cannot do it. He does not have the legal authority. Even Megyn Kelly agrees. And she is a very outspoken conservative. Listen to Megyn.
Very clearly is not constitutionally permissible. He cannot do it. I really hope he doesn't do it because I don't want a world in which I'm siding with Governor Pritzker over President Trump. But I will if he does it because he can't do it legally. However, I think that's what he's saying, Batya, that he's realized that and that he's going to send the help to cities and states that want it. And what a great way of shaming the Governor Pritzkers of the world.
I was in the Chicagoland area recently over Labor Day weekend. There were 58 shootings over Labor Day weekend. 58 shootings. That is completely unacceptable. I was also speaking to somebody who lives in that area, and they said that they don't feel comfortable going into the Magnificent Mile anymore. If you guys know what the Magnificent Mile is, if you've ever been to Chicago, it's this beautiful stretch of development. There's a lot of high-end shopping, restaurants. There's this beautiful water. It's great. I had a great time there. But she said she doesn't feel comfortable going there because of the increase in crime. And my understanding is a lot of smash and grabs. That's when people just run into a store, take a bunch of stuff, run away. And that crime has not been addressed in a meaningful way. Now, I just shared an anecdotal story. That means something that was told to me. I actually do not know what the data is for retail theft at the Magnificent Mile. Okay, I'm just telling you a story that was randomly told to me when I was in that area as to why we could not go to the Magnificent Mile. 58 shootings is a data point. That is what happened over Labor Day weekend. Obviously, gun violence is out of control in that area. Now, their mayor, Brandon Johnson of Chicago, has said he does not want federal help. That even though there is this gun violence epidemic, I would say, he doesn't want federal help, that they've got it. All right. So Donald Trump doesn't have the authority to send in the feds, and the state does not want them. And again, the governor can invite the feds in, but they don't want them in there. But my question is then to the mayor, Johnson, like, what are you doing to address this issue? Because to say that you don't need the feds, fine. I personally don't believe. I think it is extremely dangerous, a slippery slope to start using the military in this way. I mean, folks are saying the talking point is, oh, the crime rate in DC has been reduced significantly since this federal surge. Okay, do the ends justify the means? My argument is we need more cops. Like, I think we need a surge in police, but we don't need them to be federal police. Like, that is not the US. Like, MPD needs the funds to get help right now, beef up their ranks, and do what the feds are doing. We don't need the feds to do it. We need to be doing that on our own. So Chicago has a unique opportunity right now. They can address this issue. And I'm sure there's talking points. Oh, but crime is reducing. There's a reduction in crime in Chicago. Guys, that might be true, but it is not at a level that is acceptable. It is not coming down fast enough. I appreciate a good data-driven approach, and I appreciate policy shifts which bring down crime. Those things are effective. But I think what we're seeing is that they could be doing more, that there is a place for policing when we are addressing the systemic issues of crime, right? Like, first we need to decide what the root cause. We know what that is through data and studies. It's usually poverty, right? It's a lack of economic opportunities. So we need to afford more of those to the community. It is rehabilitation. Folks who do get in the system, are we helping them learn how to get a job and be productive members of society? There is a place for all of that. But here's where I think we've gone a little too far to the left to say we need all that, but we don't also need police. And I understand why. I said in my previous podcast, the Black community is the community that is plagued disproportionately by crime. And the Black community has a very painful history with law enforcement in this country. That is 100% fact. I understand that. I am a Black person. I understand that history. But what we need is a mutual agreement here. We need the police to change the way they police. They need more intelligent policing. They need more community policing in DC. What is community policing? You get to know the communities you're serving. You don't just drive by when a crime happens. You're walking up and down the street. You're getting to know the people in the community. You're knowing the neighbors. You know people by name. You know the kids. You're looking at the folks that you are protecting and serving as people, and that your job is to protect them. And in DC, I can't speak for any other police departments, but I can say in DC, I know a lot of officers, that is what they try to do. They know the people in the communities that they're in, and we need to lean more into that. And so the folks in the Black and brown community are not looked upon as criminals. They're not looked upon with suspicion. They're looked upon as human beings, and the human beings that deserve to be protected by their police force. So that's one side of the agreement. But the other side of the agreement is the community needs to buy into it. The community needs to trust their police. So once they have gained that trust, and then understand that they do have an important public function, they do serve a deterrent value. If they are there keeping people safe, it will make less opportunities for crime to happen. When crime happens, it will be responded to quicker. And a lot of the victims of crime, unfortunately, at least in DC, are members of the Black and brown community. And we deserve to be safe too. So I just want to say, how is Donald Trump going to get these forces in, if anything? Here's my prediction. If Donald Trump actually is hell-bent on sending the military to Chicago, which I think he is. I take what the president says at face value. He usually makes good on his words. I think what they're going to do, and what they're going to have to do if they're going to do it lawfully, is perhaps send in more ICE agents, conduct ICE raids, and then if there are large-scale protests, which there might be, right? Then send the National Guard in under the same pretext that they did in Los Angeles. When we hear pretextual, we mean what they are saying they are sending them in for, which is lawful, but then they'll actually be performing that secondary function, which is a deterrent value. Quite frankly, shock and awe in DC, the National Guard is everywhere. And the reality is that the crime rate has significantly been reduced in the last couple of weeks. Is that because the National Guard is performing law enforcement functions? They certainly are not. They're walking up and down the streets. I actually saw a few National Guardsmen talking to some ladies on 14th Street recently. It's their presence. It is the deterrent effect of their presence. It's the shock and awe of them being there. So I would not be surprised if the president deployed the National Guard to help protect the ICE operations, and then as a result, the crime rate goes down. The ends don't justify the means. We should not be militarizing the United States because it quickly reduces the crime rate. That is unsustainable. Unless you want to live in a country where the military patrols constantly, as soon as the military leaves, that shock and awe is going to go away. Crime is still going to be there, because this needs to be addressed at both the local level and at the root cause level. It is a complicated problem, and there needs to be complicated solutions. Just that simple. It is not a popular view, but I think that's the only view. So we got to look out. We got to see, is Donald Trump ultimately going to send in these forces, and on what authority? So far, everything Donald Trump has done, he's always had a law to cite to. Now, people disagree, which is why all these cases are going up to the Supreme Court, but at least he's had something to point to. And right now, he's got nothing to point to send the military to join the ranks of the Chicago Police Department. But of course, I want to know what you think. Do you live in the Chicago area? Have you noticed an uptick in crime? Do you feel unsafe going to the Magnificent Mile? Or do you feel like this is just like a media manufactured narrative that's just not true and is used to kind of provoke fear? Just tell me in the comments, because again, I don't live there, and I'm only as good as what I'm being told. And tell me what you think about this crime problem in general. Do you share my same fears about the military being on American streets? Or do you think something needs to be done? I argue ends don't justify the means, but tell me if you disagree. And as always, if you like what you heard, go ahead and click like and subscribe, and be sure to tell folks that Alyse heard it here.